Okay, so I should have David on the screen. David, I can see you. So hello and welcome. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Been with you for now going on 8 hours, so it's been quite a pleasure.
The full run. You've been around the world, and you you started in Australia. We're almost back there.
Yep, we're returning home.
That's right. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on board, and obviously, as the keynote talk, we wanted to make sure that everyone understood this is quite an important topic that you've had brewing here for a while, and that I know you've spent a lot of time researching and trying to deliberate between, and it's a very interesting point of view, both for threat intelligence, both for incident response, and everything in between. So we're really looking forward to it. And for those who don't know, David is the founder and CEO of URSA Inc. So we're really pleased to have him on board on the topic of UAV threats to the oil and gas industry. So, David, I'm going to start disappearing off the screen now, and your presentation should be up, and you can take it away. So, thanks so much. You've got the last talk of the event, and thanks for sticking with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. I should have the full display up. I'm only running with one monitor, so hopefully I've got everybody here. Thank everybody who's been here all day and whoever has joined us. I'm speaking on what UAVs may pose as a threat to oil and gas and the energy industry in general. But a lot of what I'm going to cover here really touches on things that you've been hearing all day. To set the sort of stage, as was said, my name is David Kovar, CEO and founder of URSA Incorporated. I had a lot of help from a gentleman named Tim Wright on this. He's a very well-established aerospace journalist, and he has the ability, due to his experience, to dig into places where I don't. So it was a really good collaboration. This collaboration also resulted in some interesting stories to tell, maybe over a drink sometime. But different agencies respond better to somebody who is a journalist, and other ones respond better to somebody who's not a journalist. So we didn't always get that right. It's been an interesting journey in that regard. Let me do the too long didn't read story here. The threat is real. You've been hearing that from various people throughout the day. Many organizations are underestimating or downplaying the threat. That's not something that we've been hearing quite as much, but I'll give you some data to support that particular conclusion. The Counter-UAS community is part of the problem as well as part of the solution. This is a difficult thing to say. I am part of that community. But I think that if we all sort of step back and look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, there is a certain kernel of truth to this particular statement. And this is a great opportunity. This particular group, DroneSec, other forms or other forums for collaboration are opportunities for us to have discussions about how we can move what we're doing to be more firmly in the we're part of the solution part of that continuum. My conclusion, my belief, and I think you've been hearing it from other people today, is that threat intelligence is important. We need to understand the threat. We need to understand the nature of the actors behind that threat. We need to understand what we're trying to defend against so we can align what our defenses are with the threat. And sharing is and always will be a significant contributor to managing the risks associated with malicious SUAS. That sharing is crucial. This forum is a great opportunity for it. DroneSec has a platform, and I'll talk about some other ones later in this presentation as well. But right now, a lot of really important information is stovepiped or siloed in various places. Some of that's behind national security concerns. Some of it's in competitive, I don't want to share with my competitors. Some of it's tied up in intellectual property. Some of it's just tied up in non-disclosure agreements. Some of it's just tied up in we don't know whether we can share this stuff or not. But I believe that we're not doing the national security any service by sort of keeping all that information about what is or is not going on to ourselves. And that's not just a US problem. That's a national problem for anybody anywhere in the world. To start off, to frame the overall conversation, this is from Sandia National Labs, a paper that they wrote back in 2007. And it applies to kinetic and cyber attacks. And by the way, I've got 20 years of doing cybersecurity, about 5 years of doing incident response, digital forensics, a bunch of things like that. So I come from more of the cyber community, but I've got some kinetic experience in security as well. So their statement is that to build the right defense, and the right defense means the ones that are most effective. It also means that it's cost effective. There are a lot of definitions to what the right defense is. But to build the defenses capable of withstanding or surviving cyber or kinetic attack or a drone attack, we must understand the capabilities posed by those threats to the government, to the function, or to the system. We've got to understand who the threat actors are, what they're using to create that threat, and only then can we really start building the right defenses. This particular conversation is about energy infrastructure. You could be protecting pretty much anything, but I'm using this particular one. I live in New Hampshire, so you're upper right on this one. This is just all the power plants in the United States. There's an awful lot of them. And there's a surprising number of nuclear reactors in here, including one that's 20 minutes away from my house, which I oftentimes forget. There are an enormous number of oil and gas refining and processing facilities scattered around the country. You'll notice there's a lot of the Midwest. I used to drive between Washington, D.C. and New Hampshire all the time, and so I'd see the ones in New Jersey. There's a bunch down in Southern California. There's a lot of it down around the Gulf Coast, and we'll get to that in a minute. There's a lot of natural gas pipelines. Thankfully, a lot of these are buried, but not all. There's also oil pipelines and other transmission systems on the surface that are potentially vulnerable. Crude oil, petroleum, HEC. What's left out of these graphics is high transmission lines, which are getting a lot more attention. After the fire in Northern California last year that was caused by poorly inspected high transmission lines, those are becoming much more of an area of concern. So if the energy infrastructure is the thing that we believe is at risk, what is creating that risk in the context of this conversation? We've been talking about UAVs, and so let's get down into some specifics. Any sub $2,000 drone, and I'd even say any sub $1,000 drone, can pose a risk for energy infrastructure. They can be used for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. All you got to do is get up there and take pictures with it. They can be used as a distraction. Right now, a drone flying over any sensitive facility is going to get some attention. And so you can use a $200, $500, FPV racer, whatever it is you want, to draw the attention of the security forces away from something else that you're doing, or just to see how they're going to react. And similar to distraction, you can use it for confusion. You can use it to create the perception that something's occurring that's not occurring. Getting down to specifics, DJI Mavics. DJI has somewhere between 75 and 85% of the consumer commercial market, so very popular platforms. And they've been really popular with hacking community, people that want to modify these things to get around the no-fly zones and to do other things that they were not originally designed to do. In the context of posing threat, some of the things that are getting done with these are making them fly much longer ranges than they're intended. And so there used to be these hacked battery attachments, so you can now have two batteries attached. Now people are using 3D printers to make a more professional ability to add a battery to these platforms. A couple of years ago, somebody put a Raspberry Pi with a cellular modem on one and used that for flying longer ranges. Now you can do that with off-the-shelf stuff for non-DJI products. And we've seen coming out of Mexico and presumably other places that they're being used for delivering malicious payloads, excuse me. There's a photograph of C4, 1 pound of C4 attached to a DJI Mavic. I think that most of us understand that the motivated threat actors are going to be moving away from commercial off-the-shelf products and moving towards home-built. There are a variety of solutions or reasons for this. On the DJI front, aeroscope is becoming somewhat prevalent, and if you're going to fly a DJI product, there's a good chance that you're going to be picked up by an aeroscope. So easy way to avoid that problem, fly something else. There's some concerns about serial numbers. If you use it for malicious purposes and it's captured, serial numbers on the UAV could be used for tracing the person who purchased it back, and then showing up at their house. So home built, there has some really good capabilities that come along with using them. You can make it fully anonymous using Pixhawk or some other flight controller. You can make it shut off the RF link. So now any counter-UAS system that's dependent on the RF link is going to be blind to them. It can fly an autonomous flight. It can do certain steps during that flight, take pictures, drop payloads, things like that. And then it can turn that RF link back on if necessary at certain points during its flight. It's much easier to use a custom data link. There's a variety of counter-UAS systems out there that are looking for specific, what I would call fingerprints, specific types of communication on specific frequencies. If somebody uses a cellular modem, obviously you're moving your data link from 915 megahertz well up into the spectrum. But there's plenty of other parts of the spectrum that you could use where somebody wouldn't see it on the RF. So that's certainly an option that comes along with home built. Also, you can control what your radar cross-section looks like. If you're using an EPO foam fixed wing, your biggest radar reflector is going to be the battery. So that gives you control over that. More on the commercial side, where there are some really powerful platforms out there, and we've seen some of them earlier today. The Avarotech Boxer Hybrid. This is a gas-electric hybrid, commercially available, has a 5-kilogram payload and a 2-hour flight time. There's a lot you can do with that at a long range. Firefly 6 is made here in New Hampshire. DOI was flying it for wildfire purposes before that fleet was grounded. EPO foam VTOL, 50 minutes endurance, 1.5 pound payload, $8,000 ready to go. It's also got a really nice sensor that you can say, watch this particular location, and no matter what you're doing with the aircraft, the focus of the EO/IR sensor will be on that location. So really powerful platform. And again, for $8,000, pretty much any motivated attacker could go acquire one. I mentioned the Syrian home builds. I get tired of people saying what you're proposing isn't possible. Syrian home build attack on the Russian air base, and I think this is 2018. Balsa plywood, gas engine. They supposedly flew about 50 kilometers. There were no GPS units on them, as far as I could tell. So these things were flying fully autonomously. If there were GPS units on there were certainly no radio links, and so they were not being manually flown from launch all the way to their target. So if this could be done in 2018 in Syria, what can be done in 2020 in the United States? I mentioned jet turbine fixed wings in here. I think they were mentioned in an earlier presentation as well. These things are amazing. Very high speed. There was some components of a jet turbine found in an ISIS drone factory a couple of years ago. Nothing functional, but you could tell that threat actors were starting to think about this particular platform. If you've got a jet turbine fixed wing coming at you, by the time that your counter-UAS system detects it and makes some sort of decision, even if it's automated in terms of how it's going to respond to that incursion, it is most likely going to be on target. So the speed is one really interesting characteristic of it. Another characteristic of it is that the explosive payload is the fuel that it is using already. At that speed, if it impacts a solid surface, that fuel is going to aerosolize, and then the motor, the impact, is going to detonate that fuel. How big is that explosion? It all depends. Raspberry Pi plus OpenCV plus ISR. So ISR is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance again. OpenCV is an open source image recognition platform, and we know what Raspberry Pis are. The combination of these three things gives you the opportunity to do all route and terminal guidance without a GPS, just using optical recognition. And the reason I mention ISR is not just because of that all route, but if you think about what a petroleum refinery looks like at night, it's got this beautiful color spectrum and all these lights on it and things like that. And I suspect you would find that those are a very unique fingerprint. You can, given a certain pattern of light, say, oh, I'm coming in from this angle and I'm this far away. So that's where you get your terminal guidance. And then one of the other things that's creating risk and opportunity is software-defined radio. We're using it on the counter-UAS side, but malicious actors are going to use it as well. It gives them the opportunity to change their data links, to encrypt them. It also gives them the opportunity to use SDR for gathering intelligence about a site. And I'll get to that in a little bit as well. We're familiar with the Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, Group 4, Group 5 classification for UAVs. US DoD uses this, NATO uses it as well, some others. It's a good way of thinking about capabilities in terms of size, weight, payload, endurance, and altitude. But as we're trying to really figure out what's creating or posing a threat to us or to the sites we're trying to protect, I really suggest that you think about a sort of broader range of capabilities. This comes from a NASA paper, I think was done back in 2010 about, and it had nothing to do with counter-UAS. It was really just thinking about what sort of capabilities there are for UAVs. Some of the interesting ones are here, all weather conditions. So, you know, if you are at a base in the Arctic and you're concerned about UAVs, yeah, you're going to need to have something coming at you is going to need to be all weather capable. One of the interesting things in here, particularly given swarm technologies, is the monitoring control multi-ship operation, mother-daughter ship operations. So it just gives some examples of some things to think about in terms of capabilities that might be brought to bear on you, on your system, on your facility. So we've talked about what's at risk, about what creates a risk. Here are the things that those UAVs pose as risks. We talked about ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. A lot of people, when I've talked to them about, you know, why somebody might use drones around security site, and they say, hey, all this imagery is in Google Earth. You know, I can just go do it. Well, first of all, Google Earth, the images are taken when they're taken. You have no control over it. Second of all those images are straight down or as close to it as they can get. That doesn't give you some really valuable information in terms of what the physical layout is, looking at it from all angles. It doesn't give you examples of what the lighting changes when it's sunset or sunrise. It doesn't give you information about how people are moving around the facility and things like that. So yeah, Google Earth is wonderful for doing remote surveillance and reconnaissance, but at some point in time in your desire to go effect upon this facility, you're going to want to get eyes on, and drones provide a really good eyes on capability. They can also fly some sensors other than optical. LiDAR can be used if you really want to get into looking at how the facility is constructed down to a very, very fine level of detail. And if you're trying to put a precision strike with a small explosive payload on, then having that sort of knowledge could be very helpful. IR gives you information about where heat sources are, obviously. That could be people movement. It could be where generators are. It could be where cooling ponds are, all sorts of things. RF collection. This is something that doesn't come up too often, but it's why I mentioned SDR earlier. If you are trying to attack a facility or attack a site, you really want to understand what's going on with the defense. What are they capable of? What's their operational tempo like? What are they doing? And so RF collection is one of the things that you would want to do, SIGINT. So what frequencies are they using? What are they using those frequencies for? And can you capture and collect some of that comms traffic? You may, by capturing that traffic, find out what their shift changes are if you're not getting it via other means. You may use this for deciding what to jam when you decide you're actually going to take action upon the site, things like that. There are passive risks created. We talked about distraction and intimidation. Response analysis. And I'll talk about the Palo Verde site in a little bit, but these drones were over the site for 2 days running. So the first day drones were over it, you get one sense of what the response looks like. You come by a second time or later, it's like, have they changed their response? And understanding how the defender is going to react to the various moves you're going to make is a really important part of preparing yourself and your team for the action you're about to take. And then there's obviously payload delivery.